Hello and welcome to another episode of PodcastDX, the show that brings you interviews with people just like you, whose lives were forever changed by a medical diagnosis. I'm Lita.
I'm Ron.
And I'm Jean Marie.
Collectively, we're the hosts of PodcastDX. Our guest today is Ambre Minty. Ambre is a patient advocate, writer, and mother. She's a vocal advocate for feeding tubes and body positivity. By participating in several photo shoots to help with body positivity and awareness for medical devices, she hopes to encourage others. She's talking with us today about gastroparesis and feeding tubes. Hi, Ambre.
Hi, Ambre.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Ambre, and good morning. Thank you for joining us. Can you start us out first by telling our listeners what exactly is gastroparesis?
Sure. So gastroparesis is literally translated to mean stomach paralysis. It is a digestive disorder in which the movement of the stomach is abnormal or absent, meaning there is a severe delay in digestion or you can't digest food at all.
Okay.
And when were you first diagnosed with gastroparesis?
I was diagnosed in 2016 after about a year of suffering symptoms that we couldn't really understand. I actually I've been to about 8 GIs in the last 6 years,
Wow.
6 of which have been, it's insane, 6 of which have been in the last 12 months.
Oh.
It's very difficult to find a knowledgeable enough GI to manage the severity that I have.
Wow.
Okay. And what were the symptoms that led you to seek medical assistance or medical review?
I would get full within a few minutes of eating, severe nausea, vomiting, pain in the abdomen, severe heartburn. It was a constant. I would eat, I would either throw it up completely undigested, or I would just be in a constant state of nausea. At one point, I was on over 8 milligrams of Zofran by IV every 8 hours, which is what I learned later is actually a dose for chemotherapy patients.
Wow.
So I was on a relatively high dose just to keep my nausea at bay. But those are, the standard symptoms, pain in the abdomen, nausea, belching, bloating, heartburn, full feeling. It's really awful to feel like that every day.
How has having gastroparesis affected your ability to work, raise your children, and also engage in recreational activities?
So I am actually disabled due to several other medical conditions that I have. So I can't work, which is horrible because I was in school for a master's degree and I had to drop out. But the gastroparesis has really impacted me socially because our society is so surrounded by food. You hang out at a restaurant, you meet with friends,
sure.
You guys snack. And when you can't digest food, you kind of lose that social aspect of your life. I've actually learned how to be around food and, go out to dinner with friends and family and just socialize with them, just be with them. But as a mom, it's impacted my 11-year-old tremendously because, you kind of miss out having those family meals together where you sit together at dinner or breakfast and, you talk about your day and making those memories of trying new cuisines and, not always having the energy because I'm so malnourished or not wanting to do anything because I'm so severely nauseous, I can't even move without wanting to vomit. So it's really impacted me as a mom not being able to do the things that I would love to do because if it's a high nausea day, there's nothing I can do. I can't leave the house because there's, so it's really impacted, being a mom. Not being able to work was a really hard pill to swallow as one of those type A personalities that's always on the go. But it's not really discussed how it impacts your whole life. Mm-hmm. And, my son and I have actually adapted our days to my bad days. So it's given us kind of a new purpose in life, kind of like a new family dynamic that we've had to learn and adapt to.
I could understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? I was going to ask you later on. I didn't actually put this in the script, but I was curious if you have any other symptoms of dysautonomia, and you just said that you have disability now and you're not working. So have you also been diagnosed with dysautonomia?
That was actually my first diagnosis in 2013.
Okay.
At one point, I was completely wheelchair bound.
Okay.
I could not stand without fainting. It was rough for a few years until we figured out what worked for me. But that was my first diagnosis, was dysautonomia.
Okay, and my second question to that.
I follow up.
Yes. Do you also have Chiari?
I do not. Symptoms that I have that could match it, but I also have a rare collagen disorder. Ehlers-Danlos.
Okay.
Wow.
Yes. But
you're talking to two of us right here.
Yes.
So, on top of the Ehlers-Danlos, I also have another collagen protein disorder
Okay.
on top of that.
Okay, so that's probably why that gastroparesis is really hitting you so hard.
My whole GI tract, we're finding, is kind of slowly failing.
Yes.
So
yes.
it's learning, how much one condition impacts your body. Many people don't acknowledge or even know just how widespread some of, these conditions can be. You can have it mildly, and then you can have it, the other end of the spectrum, very debilitating.
Right. You definitely have the hard part of it. So besides adjusting with your son with the meal and that type of things, what other adaptations have helped you in your day-to-day life getting through this gastroparesis?
So I am actually on IV fluids. That is an adaptation we had to make years ago because I was constantly dehydrated before we figured out the gastroparesis. My intake was nowhere near what it should have been. I was constantly dehydrated. So we had to introduce IV fluids, and it actually worked for not only the gastroparesis, but also the dysautonomia, the blood pressure and the heart rate issues.
Right.
So that it kind of became, this one treatment helped manage multiple symptoms and multiple conditions. So that was something we had to adapt to my, 3 times a week being connected to an IV, on top of being connected to a feeding tube. We also had to adapt my house, which you wouldn't think, gastroparesis. Unfortunately, we have, this is embarrassing, but I'll be honest, we have throw-up bags, emesis bags throughout the house.
Right.
We have them everywhere that usually I am, because I don't have that sensation, like that awareness enough ahead of time. When it hits, it's hitting.
Okay.
So we have it pretty in quick areas to just kind of grab.
Right.
We've also had to adapt to the huge amount of supplies I have. So we have, a completely separate refrigerator for my stuff, only my stuff. We have those Sterilite 3-drawer carts. We have 3 of those. We have, a rolling cart with other IV supplies. So we've really had to adapt my day-to-day. Is a day I can go out today? Do I need to take, rescue meds with me? Is it going to be an hour-long store run where I can get away with not carrying, half the house with me? So when you have that level of nausea and that level of digestive disease, you really have to weigh and adapt almost your entire life to learn how to even live life, in a sense, because you don't want to give up life.
Right.
You still want to live it, day to day, and you have to learn your triggers. You have to learn what works for you and adapt.
You know what I really love about you? Okay, I have early onset Alzheimer's,
we're
and
having
today's not a good day.
Alzheimer's
But
day.
the energy and the positivity in your voice, even though you're dealing with this, I mean, I could see why you're an advocate.
Thank you. I had to learn early on that I think that goes back to my upbringing. I was raised very differently than I'm learning a lot of other people, but I made the decision very early on in my diagnosis and my journey that I could go one of two ways. I could go angry, bitter, giving up on life, or I could take that same energy and adapt it to still achieving goals I have, still helping other people, and still doing what I can and living life within what I can do.
Sure.
So that's just the decision I personally made to do, to live.
That's amazing.
I actually had a question with this. With everything that you're saying, how has that affected your stress or anxiety level?
So oddly enough, this is actually something my counselor and I have talked about in depth, because she doesn't understand my level of thinking, and I'm learning not a lot of people do. I actually surprisingly have a very low stress level. I just choose not to let everything overwhelm me to the point I become crippled by it. I do manage some level of anxiety. I think that's normal. I do have a relatively normal level of stress, but things that I can't change or things that to me are just too overwhelming, too problematic, I hit head on. I'm like, okay, this is the problem. What are our solutions? What can we do? What's our next, plan? What's the next step? How do we go from here? Because I would rather have that plan than sitting there overwhelmed, stressed to the max, where I'm crying every day. Don't get me wrong, I do have bad days, but I personally prefer to stay low stress, low anxiety, because I don't want to compound my problems. So between counseling and my writing, I've managed to kind of do what I call journaling. I kind of, when I have those days or those anxiety, I'm high anxiety, I write it out. Those don't get published. I write it out in a journal. And I just kind of let it go out of me. And I was like, okay, well, let's tackle the problem, instead of, because then you're not only dealing with the problem, you're also dealing with the emotional aspect, which sometimes can be more overwhelming than the problem. So I've just chosen, for my own personal mental health, I'll journal it out, and then we focus on the problem.
Okay.
That's great.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That's kept me low stress, and which my whole family cannot fathom how I've stayed so low stress. But
dealing with everything, yeah, that's wonderful. I'm glad you gave the advice out to everybody. I think journaling can help a lot of people. And I have a question. You said that you've been on Zolfram, you're using feeding tubes, an IV solution. Are there other treatments available for gastroparesis? And, have you tried other modalities, or are you looking forward to trying anything new in the future?
So unfortunately, there is no cure for gastroparesis, and there's actually very few treatments available. And the very few medications that are available, some of them have very potentially dangerous side effects. For myself, I actually am not cleared to take almost every medication available for gastroparesis.
Oh, wow.
Because of another condition. Okay. I'm not able to take really any of them because of the potential side effects for me or contraindications with another condition. So there are medications available, very few. However, they do have the potentially dangerous side effects. The treatments mainly manage the symptoms. They manage the nausea, manage the bloating. The enteral nutrition feeding tubes are an option. Total parenteral nutrition is also an option, which is IV nutrition. So for me, the feeding tubes are typically in the more severe cases. There's several different types of tube, though a J-tube is actually most commonly placed as it bypasses the stomach completely. So I am completely dependent on my feeding tube. And at one point, I was even on TPN after a 45-pound weight loss.
Wow.
It was scary. So
Yeah,
so I have my feeding tube for a year and a half now. I've had, I don't even know how many surgeries in the last year to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was placed on TPN. Unfortunately, the feeding tubes kind of have a negative connotation within the community. I'm seeing that more and more. I didn't want a feeding tube. I mean, no one wants a feeding tube, but it was the only option available to me. And I went from 182 pounds to, at one point, I was 136.
Okay.
Wow.
Within 6 months. So that was a really dangerous weight loss.
Yes, for sure.
That's really it. I mean, gastroparesis has such limited treatment plans, treatment options available. And there's a very
As I was researching this, I actually discovered that they have a new neuro implant, something with right?
the neurostimulator.
Right. Have you talked to your doctors about that?
So I'm actually not a candidate for that because I have a cardiac pacemaker.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
I have actually had GIs try to get me to do that anyway, and I'm like,
Yeah.
a cardiac pacemaker is a little bit more important.
Yes, it is.
Kind of need that.
Yes, it is.
Kind of need that to live.
Right.
But that I'm seeing that becoming more and more popular within the group. A G-POEM procedure is also a new procedure that some patients are undergoing. The criteria for both is very strict. Not everyone is a candidate for either. The G-POEM, which is, if I remember correctly, is cutting a small sliver in one of the, I think it's the pylorus, maybe, the pyloric sphincter, which helps empty your stomach into your intestines. So that's a new procedure they're doing. It's called the G-POEM. And the neuro stimulator is another new implant that they're doing for gastroparesis patients. That has mixed reviews, but within the patient community.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess every year we're learning more, and new techniques are developing, and new understanding, because medicine is still, we think of it as set in stone, but it's always changing and evolving. Yes, absolutely.
So
it is always evolving.
Amber, earlier you mentioned something about having a separate refrigerator just for your food. How does how has it impacted your shopping and things like that? Because you mentioned you have a separate one for you and your son. Does it make it that much harder to shop? And
so, sorry, go ahead. So I actually do the shopping for the whole house. I live with my mom, and we sit down weekly. We do a grocery list together. They can eat whatever they want to eat. Oddly, I'm actually the cooker of the family, so I love to cook. I love to bake. I can't eat any of it, but I love it. It's therapeutic for me. It's calming for me. So my refrigerator for my food and my shopping is very simple. It's vanilla pudding, applesauce, cinnamon applesauce, and yogurt or ice cream. That's it. Those are my safest foods. That's
my
really
ears just
all I
perked
can
up when
eat.
I heard ice cream. I'm sorry.
Well, thank God you're not lactose intolerant, too.
Right. Well,
I am.
Oh, you are?
That's actually a funny thing. I am.
There's lactose.
So you have to take Lactate on top of that.
Or there's lactose-free ice creams.
Right. The only ice cream I can actually eat is from a local ice cream shop. I don't know how they make it differently, but we keep them in business.
Right.
Well, and I don't know if
So all my stuff, yeah, like it's funny. So they know me when we go in there. They have my vanilla set aside because obviously I can't have any of the fun toppings.
Right.
Right. But, you know, we keep my fridge separate for my special drinks, my juice that I use to vent my stomach. My lactated ringers have to be refrigerated. So my fridge is solely my medications and my specialty, you know, items that I need. But I do the shopping for everybody else. And it's funny and it's odd that I do that and I still cook, which everyone thinks it's a riot. They think it's hilarious, but that's just how it works for our family dynamic.
But it's actually wonderful because, in other words, you are making yourself a part of the family. You're not
isolating yourself as that part.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gina.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, it does. It makes a lot of sense.
It does.
Because you are participating. Because, like you said, food is so central to our society that if you eliminate food altogether and your involvement with it, then you're really cutting yourself out.
Right.
So if I can just add or, you know, go on with that, is there food related or anything else that makes your symptoms any better or, God forbid, any worse?
Or activities, yeah.
So any solids are an absolute no-go for me. I haven't been able to eat meat in almost 2 years. I would love a steak taco. I want one so bad. I could theoretically eat it. However, the aftermath is not worth that
few minutes
5
of enjoyment.
minutes of enjoyment.
Yeah.
So really any solid foods makes my symptoms worse. Oddly, Gas-X, extra strength 2s, and Ivy Guard help manage my bloating to an extent, which is really weird. You'd be like, that's odd. But I take Ivy Guard twice a day. It's really expensive, but it's something we found. To me, it's better than taking another prescription medication with, you know, horrible side effects. So that oddly is what I help kind of manage my bloating symptoms. It makes it a little bit better. But again, I don't put in really anything to create that gas buildup or the bloating because
what is Ivy Guard?
So Ivy Guard is it's a peppermint pill.
Oh.
That's it. It's funny and I don't know why it works. But there's been a lot of research. It's actually an IBS medication.
Okay.
But it works for me. It helps alleviate a lot of the bloating issues I have, not only in my stomach, but also in my intestines. It works. If it's a placebo effect, I'm good with it.
If it works for you, then absolutely.
I have just one more. I hate to be this intrusive, but earlier you mentioned about that rapid weight loss. How where are you now with your weight? Is it manageable? Or you feel like it's under control because of your diet and everything, or is there still some issues with that?
So I fluctuate pretty significantly between 145 and 150. That seems to be where I fluctuate currently. I'm monitored very closely with my dietitian. We speak weekly. I weigh weekly. We do labs twice a month. I am monitored not only because of the gastroparesis, I have kidney disease. So I have to monitor and keep track of everything because the slightest little deviation could mean either my kidneys aren't filtering and functioning properly and I'm retaining, or the formula, the enteral formula I'm on is working and I've stabilized my weight. I actually am currently at 156 and everyone is scratching their heads trying to figure out how I gained to 156 because it's not possible. I'm not on the formula or the TPN enough to have gained that weight, and I don't eat by mouth. So everyone's just kind of monitoring me very closely right now to find out where that weight came from.
Sure.
Whereas I'm not worried because I know it's going to drop back off, which it seems to be, but I fluctuate between, 144, 145 to 150. that seems to be where I've stabilized.
Okay, thank you.
And Amber, before you were diagnosed or really started, having these symptoms, had you ever heard of gastroparesis before? And do you know anyone else with gastroparesis? Is it something that runs in your family?
So I had actually heard of it because of the dysautonomia group. So
Okay.
I had already been aware of it and I already knew of it. No one in my family has it. I am the only person with dysautonomia, the only person with gastroparesis, the only person with really everything. My son does show signs of Ehlers-Danlos, but I haven't gone down that rabbit hole yet. But that's it. I'm the only one in the family with any of this. However, I actually do have a friend with it that I met through a dysautonomia group. We actually lived about 2 miles away from each other, and we met and we became really close friends.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
So I know quite a few people that I've met through, various advocacy, various groups that I've become close with, that I've spent time with that have it. So there's a larger community out there than I think some think there is.
Okay, and you've been able to find that support group. That's
right,
wonderful.
that's good. What has been the biggest challenge with this disease for you?
So I think it's not something most would think about. My answer is really unique. So the biggest challenge for me hasn't been the weight loss. It hasn't been the loss of, not being able to eat. For me, it's been the emotional, mental aspect of living with it and having to adapt and adjust your entire life away from food, basically. The self-image issues, I have struggled immensely in the last year and a half with my self-image, self-esteem, body insecurity. It has been prevalent and a huge aspect that I've had to battle daily since getting my feeding tubes. And it's just, I've gotten better, but it's definitely something that a lot deal with, but no one talks about. That aspect of the gastroparesis or the feeding tubes or even chronic illness. For me, the emotional and mental aspect of it has been the hardest to kind of cope with at times because it affects you so immensely.
Yeah.
And dating, single, are you going to get married? It takes so much of you, and then you're feeling insecure. You have self-worth issues. It's so all-encompassing, but it's never talked about. And that's what I've struggled with the most is, finding that confidence again, finding, seeing past the tubes and everything to see, my worth and, my confidence. So that's what I've struggled with the absolute most is that aspect of it.
Well, it seems like you're doing really, really, really well with it.
And people,
I understand it's a challenge, but I think you're succeeding.
Right, and people like you
Thank you.
are good examples for it. Like my cousins who are twins.
Right.
They have, they stand out in class because they have feeding tubes, but they also have dolls that have feeding tubes. So they have toys that have feeding tubes too. And then seeing adults who are trying to make it more of a body positive thing and showing their feeding tubes and highlighting them and not hiding it.
Right, not being embarrassed.
Not being embarrassed. I think, people like you are great examples for them to show them that, they can grow up and be happy adults and, that, they have a bright future ahead.
I think that's important because I've seen so many young women, in the feeding tube groups, so overwhelmed and so scared, and no one's really giving reassurance. No one's saying, "Hey, it's okay." No one is saying, "Hey, you can still be beautiful. You're still beautiful. Your worth is not tied to your health," and that really didn't sit well with me. So I kind of became that person, was like, "Hey, girl, you're amazing, rock it, rock that bikini, and it took a lot of work for me to get to this point, but it's actually become my motivation and kind of like my purpose. So I work because I don't want anyone to feel less than. I don't want anyone to feel that their identity is tied to their feeding tube, because it's not. There's so much more than that.
Sure.
So that's really what's been important for me.
Good. Earlier, Amber, you mentioned about your son and your mom, and then also somebody that you met that was a couple of miles away. How have your family and friends, what role have they played? How have they helped you along? You just mentioned about some of the concerns and issues and all that. What role have your family and friends played in helping you get through this, or not get through it, but
live your potential?
Yeah.
Life.
Thank you, Gene. I'm tongue-tied this morning.
Yeah.
I'm the one over here drinking coffee.
So my mom is actually a nurse.
Oh.
So that has probably helped give me an insider view of how to manage doctor's appointments and kind of advocate for myself better. I am immensely blessed to have the support system that I do. Immensely blessed. I'm very grateful for my supportive family and my friends. They have rallied around me from the beginning. I remember calling them last year hysterical, saying, hey, I need a feeding tube. I don't know what to do, and they really have helped me, go through and battle each little obstacle. And they've held me and have, cheered me on and rooted for me. And having that kind of support system has been so invaluable and so needed, because when you're dealing with this, you're like, oh, I'm alone, no one understands. And while my family may not understand in the sense that how horrible it is for me, they see that I suffer, and they have made it a point to, hey, how are you feeling today? What are you doing? Or just let's have a movie day, like let's relax. Right. But they're there if I need to vent to them. They're there for appointments, there for surgeries. My mom has had to take countless days off because of surgeries for me, emergency surgeries, emergency hospital stays. My dad lives 4 hours away, so my dad has had to travel up here and watch my son go to my dad for a few days while I've recovered. So I've been really lucky to have a really amazing support system where I've had friends and family that if an emergency happened or something happened, I had someone that could step in and help me, or just even be there and listen and be supportive. So it's been really an amazing, I don't want to say ride, because I feel like that's the wrong word, but an amazing journey having them, having that support, because really having a support system makes all the difference.
It's half the battle.
It is. And it hasn't always been sunshines and rainbows. We've had our fast.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they always wanted what was best for me and wanted me to be my absolute best and do what I could for a better quality of life. So they rallied around me.
That's great.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Amber, what is the best advice that you've ever received on this journey?
So I don't know, honestly. I've seen a lot of negativity. Even becoming, initially diagnosed, it's overwhelming. I wouldn't say maybe the biggest piece of advice I've gotten was to be true to myself. And I think I got that from one of my home health nurses. I don't even recall who told me that, but I remember someone telling me, just be true to yourself. You matter. I think it's one of the, don't let it control you. So that's really what has, those things have really stuck with me. Someone telling me it's not over, or
you're bigger than the disease.
Yes. Honestly, I think the thing that has stuck with me the most is when I was told, it doesn't define you.
Mm-hmm.
That for me was like, whoa, like, don't let it define you.
Right. So you're living with it. You aren't it. Right.
I work with young adults with severe physical disabilities, and I'm familiar with the tube feedings and this and that. And I mean, as a rec therapist, my advice to them is just exactly that. Your disability does not define who you are. It's a part of you, but it doesn't define you. It doesn't put you in a box. You are who you are, and you can make out of yourself what you want to. You're not limited just because of your quote-unquote condition.
Right, and you can adapt.
Absolutely.
Whatever you want to do in life, there's adaptations.
Absolutely.
Well, that sounds like really good advice, and I'm sure our listeners are happy to hear that as well. And then, Amber, what do you wish people knew about your condition, and what advice do you have for someone who's been recently diagnosed with gastroparesis?
So this was a two-parter. I wish people knew just how debilitating it actually is. And I wish they listened more understanding, more compassion, more kindness, really. And doctors. Mm-hmm. We need doctors to listen. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had a doctor tell me, well, your weight is 170, you're fine. And meanwhile, my calorie intake is 500 for the week. Wow. I mean, that's not fine. That's dangerous.
Right.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
Listening, compassion. I need more of that. The community needs more of that, not dismissive. So that was something I really wish people knew, is really how debilitating it can be, and listening. It's honestly that simple. I mean, that's just kindness, compassion, listening.
That would make the entire world a better place.
Yeah.
So much better.
Oh,
yes,
yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Everybody
absolutely.
needs to do that.
Yes, but especially doctors and healthcare providers. Sure.
Definitely. My advice would be find what works for them. The meds aren't going to work for everybody. The diets aren't going to work for everyone. And that's okay. Find what works for you. Find the safe foods for you. Find the safe medications for you. Work with your team, not against your team. Work with them. Also, it does not have to control your life. It doesn't have to take your life away from you. Yes, it's life-changing, but it's not life-ending. Right. I don't know how many times I repeat that. It's life-changing, not life-ending. You can still have goals. You can still have dreams. You can still achieve those with the right treatment plans and the right management. You can do these things. Don't give up. I think that underlying would be don't give up.
I have
hope.
A new phrase for you, one that we use called the new normal.
Yes, this is a new normal.
Isn't that the catchphrase for 2020?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't fake it. That can't be. 2020 needs to be over.
Yeah.
Amber, I understand that recently you started an online presence, Chronically Strong. What inspired you to start Chronically Strong?
So what started Chronically Strong was the overwhelming insecurities I personally faced, and I saw in so many other people, and the overwhelming lack of hope that I saw, the body image issues. So I ended up somehow becoming a vocal advocate about body positivity and being strong and embracing who you are and letting that empower you. So the overwhelming, which oddly, the surgeries, the, mental health, issues I battled from surgery, because I have a 4-inch incision down my abdomen. It is not pretty. I have 2 feeding tubes. This is not pretty, but it's pretty for me. I'm pretty, and really doing, several photo shoots to help myself, but also help others. It just really inspired me to create this community, create this organization, create this message that you are not your diagnosis. You are not your medical device. You are not your assistive device. You are you, and you matter. That was really the root of it for me, was you matter. You have worth, and you are strong, and you are amazing. And really that's what inspired me, with seeing so many struggle with it and wanting to help other people.
That's excellent.
Yeah,
That's fantastic. Yeah, you are a real inspiration for for everyone, especially I can picture my little cousins,
As they grow up.
as they grow up, having a more positive body image because of people like you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, how can our listeners learn more about you and your journey?
So I actually have a blog. It's called livingwithdys.com, DYS. And I'm also extremely active on Instagram. I'm on there several times a week. The photo shoots I participate are usually on there. If I'm just having a day where I need to get something off my chest about, self-image or depression or anxiety or really anything, that's kind of my sounding board, my speaking point. I use Instagram a lot. I am the most active on Instagram.
Okay.
My blog, I'm actually working to launch a pen pal program through my organization for the chronically ill community, because that seems to be a very popular thing I'm seeing. Was like, why aren't there pen pal programs? Like, why can't we have pen pals? I'm like, that's a really good idea.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been working on that the last few weeks. It actually should launch tomorrow, Sunday. Also, my blog, I'm really open on that. I host virtual events monthly. Several times a month, we host games and virtual meetings. So really learning more about me and my journey is either Instagram, my blog, my website, Facebook even. So I'm very open on my social media.
Well, we'll make sure that we put links for all of those on our website for you.
Absolutely.
Right. And Amber, thank you so much for sharing your story with us this morning. We really appreciate you taking the time to really go in depth about your journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you, everyone.
If our listeners have any questions or comments related to today's show, they can contact us at PodcastDX@yahoo.com, through our website, PodcastDX.com, on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, or Instagram.
And if you have a moment to spare, please give us or leave us a review wherever you get your podcast. As always, please keep in mind that this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment and before undertaking a new healthcare regime, and never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this podcast.
Till next week.